Good morning. I think we'll go ahead and start since we're a little bit late. My name is Samar Haddad King. I am the director of Ya Samar Dance Theater, based in Palestine in New York, and Mintala, which is another dance collective comprised of dancers from the Arab world, and it's co-directed with Jorge Cripes. And Nijme will introduce herself, but I wanted to first talk about how we met, which was in 2014. And we were in the desert in Wadi Rum in Jordan, and there was a conference there called Diwan, and it was the first of its kind in the Arab world, where 65 professionals, mostly Arab, but some foreign, but had work or interest in the Arab world, met and gathered and discussed what's going on with contemporary dance in the Arab world. And Nijme had seen, I had been working with young artists and we had done a small performance, and she came up to me in the desert and said, "Why the narrative? Why the rush?"
So that's a good introduction about me. I like to just ask evident question to my friends and colleagues working in the field of dance in the Arab world. Because a simple question let us maybe in a way deny our difficult and hard time and transformative time in our world there. So just to get back to the basic, I am curator, dramaturg, based in Brussels, keeping like my work close to dancer, choreographer from the Arab world. It's always about human being meetings, and it's not about geography. I am from Algiers, so I'm close to this world. I have been to Marrakesh, Casablanca, Cairo, Beirut, Tunis, but it's always about working with some artists that are, for me, bringing new layers, new vocabulary, new questions in the field of dance. The body is really completely charged this last year. It was always a medium in performing art, but it's with all what happened these last years, it's becoming very evident that we are charged daily, directly and in an indirect way. So after this, I have been working in Marrakesh with the Al Mukhtabar training program, in Casablanca with Darja Space. I have been recently curator for DKF Cairo, and it's not about just a program, and it was for me important to go and follow rehearsal of young artists working in the city. Knowing that for us there, it's to work and to rehearsal, it's a kind of militantism. It's a choice that is not neutral. So I put my glasses. I wanted to talk with Samar. A conversation, by definition, is an act of engagement, of coming together for questioning our local and global, an attempt to reach a deeper understanding of the person with whom you converse. It's not neutral. It's a will of rejecting our normal time, letting us far from each other. It's not objective. Apart from friendship, it was questioning Samar works and its relation to creation in a territory of conflict, violence, and instability. Her projection, her creation, dealing with an uncertain path that in a way is a strong drive in her creativity and permanent reframing of the work, a permanent reshaping of the project. Of course, I have been in Ramallah, but never to Haifa. Why? How is today for her dancer? For whom are they staging, performing? Are they really performing there? I will give some notions or key elements I do observe in many work of young choreographer or dancer or performer. I will use these three words: performer, dancer, and choreographer. And this notion of belonging, because from the moment that Mohamed Bouazizi, a Tunisian street vendor, set himself in a fire on December 2010, it's already 6 years ago, he became a kind of catalyst for a series of kind of protest, request for another system. So protest and demand of political and social change. Those protests, I remember when it happens on Tahrir Square, I was in Marrakesh during the festival, the UNIF festival in Morocco that allowed dance on stage. And we were all within the theater. I remember this moment, and I was talking to Samar about this, because although we are not in Egypt and in Tunisia, we were at the venue for doing the festival, performing, and within the break, in a break, we were running to Al Jazeera. At that time, Jazeera was very important. Running in front of the screen and looking Tahrir Square, how it can be that Mubarak will just fall. And I remember big eyes of young dancers like Mohammed, Muad, Fuad, Toufiq Izidjo, the choreographer based in Marrakesh, having in the training program, big eyes, like we are jealous. It happened there, it can happen here. And this feeling of belonging to a kind of a common concern, I will not call common territory, but common concern, a common request from our system, I could see it also coming within the body, within the performed body on stage. So this notion of belonging, I have seen it in Cairo and in Marrakesh, and this notion of identity that I also pointed in the last work from Mitqal Sghir, a Syrian refugee choreographer based in Paris, that I couldn't have in Cairo because the visa is not only a problem between Europe and the Arab world, but it's also a problem, borders are also between us. And Mitqal couldn't enter Egypt because he's Syrian today. That is the situation today. So Mitqal is also really related to this notion of belonging and identity. He said that in his last project, Displacement, I'm just giving some example of young choreographer working with this, working with our time, with what I call transformative time, is he wants to examine the identity of the Syrian body, to make visible the human in its complicated context of revolution, migration, wars, rising ideologies, and breath of freedom, through poetry of the creation, and through me, those people who are directly affected by the war. So Mitqal, living like in exile now in Paris, he tried to get all these layers and try to translate this in a performer in his last performance, and inviting with him another dancer and a filmmaker, three bodies on stage that try to recall a present time and also a past time. There is a kind of another element or another like ligne dramaturgique within the work I have been observing, researching, and I am on a project of a documentary film based on interview and those performances going on now. There is a kind of very dense performative act. I rather call it performative act than a performance, because I could see in many work that it's very intense and very short, condensed in time, like Shayma Shukri in Cairo, Mitkhal, Muad in Marrakesh, all this generation having a kind of very intense body, and the only like medium or the only material, it's the kind of only the body screaming, only the body coming out, and it's always a kind of a very rude, empty stage without anything else, and just a body and the capacity of translating it on stage. So vibration, tensions are a kind of, in many ways, coming within this performance. In contemporary creation, time is often related to the historical and the present, to the individual and the collective. However, with the young generation, perhaps time is a sum of past and current, of the intimate and the shared one. Bodies are tools or filters of our present time, which is overfilled with conflict, dreams, and disillusion. Yes, 6 years ago, we were completely in another time if we compare it with today. Today, after the fall of Mubarak, the coming of Morsi, the coming then of Sisi, the war in Syria, the fall of Libya, all this, you can see when discussing, when being in a workshop, when working, it's every time all this fluidity of event and information are crossing our discussion, and it's a kind of different scale. It's at the personal level and at the collective level, because it's discussion at the collective level about what does it mean to be Arab, what does it mean to be against the system, what do we want, how can we do it. So it's always this interference of the time around us and the time of the creation that usually need kind of solitude, need a kind of retreat, need a kind of slowness, and you have these two times coming together and be the drive of the creation. Over the last years, the context in the Arab world, and I do now do a comment because I say the Arab world as like a big region, as one region. It's not. We know that from Middle East to North Africa, from Morocco to Egypt, from Palestine to Tunisia, we are human beings and so different, and so various way of dealing with time and with space and with movement. But still all this young generation, in my opinion, are having a common concern, are having common questions about how how they can be political and they can be part of the society, how can they participate with their art or with their citizenship. So many questions about how to deal with this transformative time, how to deal with the system, and in the same way conserving and preserving its freedom as individual. So this concern of a collective issues and the individual freedom and singularity. They created a different vocabulary and body language, allowing to deal again with dreams through the poetics of space and movement. They finally go to new identities, rooted sometimes in the heritage, sometimes in their personal and very intimate bodies layers, and they negotiate with the society to be on stage, on public space, on a roof of buildings, or in an apartment, or in the in-between, of in a market space. These last years, we have seen a negotiation of space and the reshaping of the space of the performance. It's the black box is not anymore, and we don't have really black box for dance, or hardly we negotiate a black box once a year in our venues. But within the dance field, young people are claiming and appearing and performing and having a kind of relationship with the others in different spaces. I will quote Fouad, one of the young dancer and choreographer from Marrakesh. When working on his, we did a training with Tawfiq in Marrakesh, and Mohammed, who will be in the workshop, Mohammed Al-Mqaisi in the workshop, and Fouad Nafili and Muad were three young performers. And Fouad, when questioning him, I did some interviews and questioning him about his work, his solo, he said, I really needed to be alone on stage, pushing me back to the period I lived from 2008 until 2013, to talk about the things that moved me, what I may have observed, may have understood. Sarab, his solo, is about this, but at the same moment, I shout in the name of everybody who was eager to realize something and wasn't able to fulfill their desire, for everyone. Talking about, in fact, the revolution in Egypt and in Tunisia, that his shouting on stage was maybe needed and needed for his own to confirm his existence within the society and his will of dancing, but it was also for him, for so many young people. And Mohammed was telling me also during an interview, in fact, you don't know what is true, talking about information and the flow of information we were having during our workshop. In fact, you don't know what is true and what is wrong. In a given moment, you register all this information without denying or believing them altogether. You got filled with, and that's it. Like those came here and those attacked there, and it's just like every day like this. But to be able to build a proper judgment out of all this on what happens to you is simply not possible. In the end, you don't know that what you hear is real or fake. So about all this transformative time going there. Therefore, there is always this difference between your time and the real time where the events or the movement take place. Sometimes you are late and the events are far from you. Sometimes you recover and you walk and you are with them. And then again you exceed the event with your imagination, projecting how things could happen this way or another way. And then you come back to the fact and you understand things are that way, or instead they happen to be. So it looks like a race game, and I end quote Muhammad. I will show you some images that were taken in different cities with a young choreographer and dancer. The first is a slide from a drawing on the wall in Cairo saying, "We are against the system." That was the main statement in many cities like Tunis, Al-Qahira, and at the same moment in Marrakesh, there is this performances, when it happens, they go on public space and they take the public space to, there is a kind of calmness, a kind of dangerous calmness in Morocco. This is to give an idea of the groups that are in the training program in Marrakesh and the work that have been done there. Ahmed Al-Gindi from Cairo, working within a kind of doing a performance where he put himself in a very defined and very limited box, completely floating and in the same way disappearing. Dania Hamoud, I wanted just to give them name, and I will not analyze their work, and I just want you to have names and images of all these young choreographer in different cities working and doing different performances this last year, and being together in a way in this question of belonging and question of relation to the time. That is Dania Hamoud from Beirut. Within her work called Mahali, My Space, questioning where can be and what it's her space. Muad Haddadi from Marrakesh, hiding his face and showing his torso to the other. Shuruq facing public on the main public square of Marrakesh. Yassine and Muhammad in Casablanca in a very small space, tighted together. Saif al-Din Manaim in Tunis in a parking space. And I will finish this with this notion of how this space for us and for within this work, because I don't like this word of for us and for you, it's not saying that we are there and you are, it's not about this, it's within this kind of work, borders are also not simply our real and physical border that we have to cross in some cities and some territory, but are also our mental borders within our daily life, within our also emotions and feeling. Borders that are like Muna Hatoum in her work called Light Sentence. This work is, I thought about it when I attended it was not in my presentation in the beginning, but when I attended this amazing opening of this Congress, talking of this first lecture, the second lecture of the first morning, and we had this performance with fences, and performer physically were crossing one fence to another one, and with a lot of pain, maybe you can imagine pain, physical clash between them, physical clash with the fences. I came to think about this physical fences on stage, like this set completely done for this performance. It reminded me the work of Muna Hatoum when she did this and call it Light Sentence, and she has you can imagine within this like small boxes, and the impression, the feeling of fences and border and to be imprisoned is really going with the time, because there is a lamp, a light going down slowly, and then all the shadow and the projection on the wall, they change slowly depending on the height of the light. If you can imagine with me that this light is coming down slowly, and then the shadow brings other perception of the space, and then this experience of being within this installation, it's a kind of a random of possibility of fences, a random of possibility of being confined to one and just one space, a random possibility to be seen and put in a very small category, like your performance are only from meaningful only for this word and only meaningful for me. So there is a random of possibility, and when I attended this amazing conversation between these two fighters it was Thursday morning, I do think about also this work that has from Muna Hatoum. So I stop here. I'd give the micro to Samar, and we will come back later to the video.
We talk about borders. Our lives are filled with them. Some of them we can see, even reach out to touch, others not so tangible. In Palestine, there are many. The ones that you can see, the ones that are spoken of time and time again. Al-Hawajiz, the checkpoints. They are just the appetizers of this intricate party of divisions so artfully engineered by our captors. The larger Arab world is not immune to these lines of discourse, and the talk associated with breaking the status quo of our current situation seems like this never-ending dialogue filled with resolute determination that is all too quickly deflated. Time is sped up because of borders. Time is also stopped. Life becomes an interwoven mess of marathons and doctor's office waits, a game of freeze tag. Bound 2010, first attempt. My husband was denied a visa to the United States because he was in jail for political resistance 20 years ago when he was a teen. I had just begun a residency in New York City to create a new evening length work with my company, the title Bound. In this weird nightmare when he was denied because he's a terrorist, the one act of clarity I did was buy a one-way ticket to Palestine, and I've been there for the past 6 years. The team of Bound consisted of one actor, the composer and myself in Palestine, and 7 dancers and 1 actor in New York City. They filmed the rehearsals, and the composer and I built the score on video. They rehearsed, and I participated via Skype. For over an 8-month period, I remained largely on New York City time, so I could be with them for the rehearsals. Days turned into nights for me, and my lifestyle was changed. I was quite isolated from my community in Palestine in a way, and at the same time still quite isolated from the company in New York City. The false hope that the experience would come alive while we were communicating through this little screen. Playground 2013. Current play, past trauma. Playground is a 4-channel video installation and live performance originally set in the first floor of an abandoned house in Ramallah, Palestine. The performers are restricted to particular rooms, while the audience is able to move as they please, each choosing their own unique viewing experience. The various rooms can contain a PlayStation, like an actual PlayStation, an ongoing loop of video leaked on WikiLeaks of a drone attack on a neighborhood in Iraq, a screening of ESPN's film The Two Escobars, and 3 rooms of live performance addressing the use of music torture, a method used by the US Army and various armies in Guantanamo Bay in Iraq, and others and they play the same song extremely loud over and over for days in order to torture the prisoners. Playground invites the audience to question their own role as an observer in this context. At what point does their participation implicate them in the action of the game? I worked with 3 dancers. 2 were brothers, self-taught hip-hop artists from YouTube, from a refugee camp in the West Bank. Another from a small village near Jerusalem, but he can't actually access Jerusalem because he's on the West Bank side of the wall, capoeira trained. When we met, I explained the piece and warned them that the rehearsal process won't be about steps. It may be full of silence and non-movement. And while it would be physically taxing, specifically because it was during Ramadan in the summer, and 2 of them were fasting 10 hours during exactly the time of the rehearsals, the emotional tax needed to be considered. We created scenarios. How did you get to prison? Who took you? From where? Were you there a long time? Was this the first time? Was this new? All while listening to the same intense songs for hours on end. While we were playing, real historical trauma, evident in their being, was being poked. I only asked them to dip into these dark pockets if they wanted to. Sometimes they did, but it was usually coupled by a funny story. During the performance, the dancers were in their rooms for around 3 hours, sometimes more. We had rehearsed different scenarios and the embodiment of isolated time and its psychological and physical effects. And they worked from this physical research live during the performance. Bound 2014, 2nd attempt. I was commissioned to recreate the piece. We had now 11 performing artists from 7. Or 13 from 8, actually, the actors. 6, okay, this is confusing. 6 only allowed to be in the occupied West Bank of Palestine, 1 of whom is deaf. 4 dancers and 2 actors from historic Palestine, 48 Israel, there's a lot of names for it. 2 of them children. 1 dancer in New York City, a director, me, a composer, West Bank, a set designer, and New York City, a set constructionist, West Bank, lighting designer, New York City, lighting technician, West Bank, and a lot of other people connecting the dots. I was the only mobile player in the construction of the piece, reconstruction of the piece. New York City, Ramallah, Haifa, Nazareth were the fields, and a few times in a small village called Kufr Yassif. There were a few dancers, 4, that could at least travel all of Palestine, the West Bank and Israel, because they hold the Israeli citizenship. All but 2 of the dancers in the West Bank were based around Ramallah. However, the 2 living outside the city of Ramallah were subjected to long trips by public transportation that often ceased when the Israeli army decided to lock up certain cities by using flying, temporary and random checkpoints. There are 99 fixed checkpoints within the West Bank and between the porous borders of the West Bank and Israel, with over 200 flying checkpoints and hundreds of road obstructions. Arabic, English, Arabic Sign Language, and a made-up sign language were used in most rehearsals. Artists ranged from 11 to 35 years old. Rehearsals. Some tasks were repeated with the separate groups, meaning I had a task for a section that everyone was in, so instead of rehearsing it together, because we couldn't be together sometimes, I rehearsed the same idea in 3 different spaces with 3 different sets of dancers. It was quite difficult to coordinate, and the daily task always seemed to change, even though I had many notes to refer to from the previous rehearsal. Other tasks were just given to certain groups because time was an issue. We began rehearsals on February 7th. The piece premiered April 28th. The first time the entire cast would ever be together was April 18th, and we had 6 rehearsals, 2 hours each, before the premiere. The performance was 1 hour and 10 minutes, and we used 3 mobile set pieces that were about 2.5 meters high and ranging from 2 to 3 meters long. And they were the 3 inanimate extra characters of the piece. Though this wasn't planned, all the elements, along with the projection of the actors, came together the first day on the premiere. A major theme in Bound is fragmentation, to safeguard those 1,000 pieces from fracturing into 1,000,000. We created a Facebook group where we posted video to create some sort of connectivity. Rehearsals could be experienced by all. And in order to understand our own fragmentation, we tried to understand what binds us, and in so doing, we made more attempts to defy this kind of separation that we live in. Mintela 2015, 3 days. Jorge Crithas and I are co-directors of Mintela, a dance company comprised of artists in the Arab world. We use Pan-Arab to describe ourselves, which has sparked conversations of Gamal Abdel Nasser and Pan-Arab nationalism, which feels violently appropriated. We have tried to redefine what it means through an artistic context and continue to dialogue with artists and colleagues about what does it even mean? Are only Arabs allowed? What about the Berbers in Morocco, Kurds in Syria, Iraq? What about the immigrants living in the Arab world from Philippines, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Indonesia? We basically accepted a porous identity for the company, and the participants are those that are living in the Arab world who speak Arabic, since developing a common vernacular was important. We first met in Egypt, 2015. 3 days before the phase of building our new work, we had 3 dancers of 8 confirmed, and one of those 3 was actually just based in Egypt. The Egyptian courts has just sentenced Morsi to death, who was elected president after the first election following the Arab Spring and the downfall of Mubarak. He was sentenced along with hundreds of other people. Islamists, traitors, anti-freedom, Daesh, ISIS people. I remember calling the Egyptian dancer, Hezzat, after it happened, and he didn't answer, and I just kept hitting redial. Finally, he called laughing and said, "Shu yakhti, what sister? What's so important? And I said, "They just sentenced Morsi to death. Is it going to be safe? What's going on?" And he laughed, and he said, this is why there are more checkpoints today. Continues to laugh, and I said, it will be fine. But do we have dancers? We in Palestine, like they were in Jazeera, were during the first revolution, were on the TVs and imagining Tahrir Square with millions of people, but now armed. A day before we were supposed to travel, visas went through for most except one Palestinian who was left behind. And we embarked on this new adventure. The only things we knew were the dancers were hungry. They wanted intensity, they wanted release, boring, fun, madness. They wanted continuity. The promise of continuity through time, through artistic practice. It was the wish of so many of the performers. The defragmentation. 2015 Bound, 3rd attempt. There were 3 dancers in New York City, 1 in the West Bank, and 3 in 48 Palestine. Performers aged from 19 years old to 52, from all around and they were all from different parts of the world. So the first 2 attempts of Bound felt really unsatisfactory, and not the Martha Graham dissatisfaction that resonates with all artists. The failure that the planning, the process of resilient defragmentation, was always winning over artistic discovery. So we got the funding, the venues, and began again, and this time we were going to get deep, and deep we did. We finally had rehearsals where we could give ourselves time to ponder. We knocked down intensity and allowed ourselves to coast when we just needed to coast. October came, and Palestine and performers and the NUIC performers were reunited for 2 weeks. We would go deep together. Then, as we say, بالعربي, ولعت البلد. The country went on fire. Extrajudicial murders, knife attacks, framed knife attacks, closures, no permissions, more checkpoints rained down on Palestine. We canceled all performances in Palestine for various reasons, which were safety of performers who were illegally smuggled into areas that they were not allowed to be in, out of shame because people are dying, people are being murdered, out of potential public shame because people are dying and people are being murdered, and out of sadness. Could we dance when we were so fucking sad? Then we barely made it to Korea and Japan to perform. I wanted to surpass the climax of this journey of going, to these other places that know occupation, that have histories rich like ours, and just fast forward to the afterwards, just be back at home. Once back at home, a seasoned performer in Bound told me, "In the end, I don't know what Bound is about," unquote. It wasn't dissatisfaction, it was failure. The artistic process was conquered by attempts to persevere, to continue. Non-Static Aesthetics 2015. Working in a public space to defragment this space stolen over time. This was a 2015 arts and education project developed for youth in Palestine. We brought together 16 dancers ranging in ages from 12 to 25 and 3 professional musicians from around the country for the first time. It was a 4-month creative process, and it was a live performance series in various places throughout Palestine. Unconventional venues, including abandoned and dilapidated buildings in urban and rural areas. The piece examines how our aesthetic ideals are informed by culture and society. By juxtaposing dance vignettes within the backdrop of abandoned place, the goal was to reclaim emotional space within a fragmented physical space and re-examine how beauty can be discovered in the midst of ruin. During this process, Samat Wakim, who's with us today in the workshop, and Aina Safiye, who danced with me in both YSCT and Mintala, worked with me, and the 3 of us were working with young artists consistently to give them an experience that was focused and detailed. We used cards with intricate drawings from a game called Dixit to inspire movement. We used bread, the making of bread, the game of chess, our grandmothers, to create scenes played out in places with historical significance and current resolution. We wanted to strip these dancers from convention for a bit and return it, and allow our audiences to broaden their idea of performance and performance space. The dancers were performers and guides as they led groups ranging from 50 to 100 through different mapped out paths within the performance space. Our performance spaces were destroyed old villages that had been rebuilt over time, buildings that were stolen from us and retaken millions of dollars later, and homes that were on the brink of destruction. We wanted to give new life to places that suffered from quick and slow death, with hopes that more reclaiming can happen in the future. 2015, Mintala, Jordan, 24 hours in a day. Egypt was our start. It was the formation and the place for physical research. It was also the beginning of Jorge and I's venture to co-authorship of a new work. The dancers were varied, self-taught, formally trained as children, ones jumping from workshop to workshop, and university trained. The heterogeneous dance history of this collective, not workshop, was both a challenge that everyone seemed to accept, including directors and performers. Fast forward 6 months, now we're in Jordan. The one that was left behind the last time, along with 2 new artists, were with us, and this was our building time. Our time to create the work, the premiere of the Pan-Arab dance company, Mintala. We knew we wanted to we wanted to make an adaptable work to indoor and outdoor non-traditional performance spaces. Translated to mean we could do it anywhere. Be as adaptable as we could because we know the restrictions, the lack of theaters, the abundance of outdoor festivals, and the desire to be with our people on the streets, to be in the streets, to go gently into a shared public space instead of theaters that can be economically prohibitive, a daily wage on a dance ticket, not easily accessible, checkpoints, or closed because they were run by anti-government fascists. So we decided that it would be best to build outside since we'd be constructing sets out of kind of heavy material. My cousin gave us his farm to work on, and we transformed it into a construction site. A positive of not having formalized dance education on the university level in most of the Arab world is that many artists in fact study something else. So one of our dancers was a construction worker who used to build Israeli settlements, one an engineer and one an architect. The race began. We always believed that time management was our forte. The problem, however, is when we moved everything outside, we lost at least 2 hours because there was no sun. We couldn't help but laugh that this was December and the days are short. The race was now on fast forward. As we built the piece between the outside workspace and inside rehearsal space that we had at the French Culture Institute, we built a safe space that we based on the building of a mandala. There is something about the time that it takes to build a mandala, often weeks, a long meditative practice. The piece, which begins days before the dance with the building of the sets, is a practice in presence, a slow meditation, a pause. As we created the work through mapping, imagery, function, the product, the dance that began to emerge was kind of this intense build. We were committed to balancing the calm, the silence, with this intensity. There is a kind of addiction to intensity in our part of the world, perhaps because of an overabundance of violence through actual experience or viewed experiences, or perhaps because of the race of time. 100% of our artists in Mintala don't know where they will end up. Some people it's lack of opportunity, lack of sustenance. For others it's about safety, and for many of us, even if we don't want to go and we want to stay, we could be kicked out at any moment, with no choice. So we hit fast forward and turned the music full volume. My final attempt, 2016 Bound, transformation of product through time. I made a deal with myself and then with the performers. We try once more, and if it doesn't work, we drop it. We all agreed, cynically. We started placing bets. If taking the gesture from Dana Kaspersen's workshop she presented yesterday, we would all be like this, if whether it would work or not, who the hell knows. But we started again, same cast as before, but now -1, and we kept laughing because eventually the piece will turn into what it is now, of me just giving speeches about the piece. The news is always bad. We all agreed to let ourselves be angry when we needed to, sad, lonely, or tired when we needed to, but do it fully and then come back to the group. Structurally, we did the final changes, the final edits over 6 years, and I promised it would be the last of them. We talked about character, we talked about narrative, fictitious and not. What does it mean to be bound by sound, by people, relationships, memory? What does it mean to be bound by concrete and metaphorical walls? Maybe we improvised on existing material to see if it was our current truth. We engaged. We did our last open rehearsal in a basketball court in Palestine, and we departed to Tunis. I'm going to give a brief overview because this is quite long. Five of us arrived to the airport in Tel Aviv. One had to take the bridge to Jordan because there's no airport that he can travel to. There were 3 American passports, 1 Israeli travel document, and also a Jordanian passport, and 3 Israeli passports. The Americans, the Jordanian, were allowed on the plane. The others were not. We were told that we didn't have enough proof that we would be let into Tunis when we got there. The festival was in coordination with the Ministry of Tunis, and we had been given the okay. But it wasn't enough for the Israelis. So we were left behind. The three returned back to Haifa for 2 hours, and we to Amman on a plane. The dancer waiting for us in Amman was also stuck, and they said, no, you don't have enough proof as well. And he had his invitation letter, and then we went to the bosses and said, no, we have an invitation letter. And they said, oh, okay, great, you can go, you're gonna go on. Just wait. We waited, the bosses changed, and after about an hour, the boss said, oh, you should have been here an hour earlier, gates closed. So he was also left behind. I told him the last thing, don't go back to Palestine, go to my aunt, we'll figure it out. We had now in Tunis, when we arrived, 2 performers of 6, so it was becoming this reality that it's just going to be me on stage. I met the directors of the festival, and the hellos and the excitement of meeting people that you've been communicating with for 6 months was just out the door and needed a solution. Interior Ministry was contacted, and khalas, we found a solution. We will talk to the airlines directly. The catch was we needed now all the dancers that were now in Israel to go to Jordan through a different bridge. So the ones in Haifa went to Jordan, 2 hours, were stuck with the secret police because I had given them all my cameras and equipment because I'm so checked with the Israelis that they thought they were reporters going to Syria. So they were kept with the mukhabarat. And then they finally get to the airport after staying there 7 hours before checkpoint, and they wait. The check-in, sorry. Barges in Palestine from Nablus returned back to Jordan the same day and also waited with them the 7 hours. All this was happening, and I'm wondering, will they even be able to walk when they arrive? I asked 40 hours of travel, it's not easy. I asked everyone if they could handle what was happening. Art is not worth physical and emotional collapse. But they said, no, of course, we come. After the 40 hours of being awake, I fell asleep. And 1.5 hours before the flight takes off, they're denied again. Zoe and Muaz, our technical director, came with a bottle of whiskey, and we started planning, what the fuck are we gonna do? 15 minutes before check-in closed, I opened up a Photoshop file and started to forge an official document from the government of Tunis based on an old one that I had to just show the airlines. The panic in the dancer's voice was real. All this for nothing? Then Muaz had a brilliant idea that go to another airlines. Maybe the communication is there at the original airlines because we had switched airlines. He went into the original, so one of the dancers ran to the original airlines. Oh, what? The communication had been there since yesterday. They were let on the plane, and they arrived to Tunis. The next night we performed. Ayman and I had to go home. Ayman had to go home, one of the performers, after dinner. He was quite shaken. Never in his life had he felt so unpresent in a performance. Barges had the time of his life. Most of them had the look of marathon runners. For me, it was the first time I had seen a company of dancers making choices as a collective, supporting the individual, picking one another up, and dusting themselves off in a 6-year process. End.